Why are quantum technologies a must-win for the United States? How can the emerging quantum corridor in Illinois help the United States take the pole position? I'm your host, Navin Girishankar, president of the CSIS Economic Security and Technology Department, and today we speak with Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, ranking member of the House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, thank you so much, Navin.
Let's get into quantum. You have been a leader on critical and emerging technologies, and in particular, an advocate for U.S. leadership on quantum technologies. Why quantum? What's at stake for the United States?
Well, thank you for your attention to this subject. You know, quantum is one of those technologies of the future that will determine, in my opinion, who will win the race for prosperity, for wealth, for upgrading the standards of living of their population. And we want to be the winners. And quantum, in very layman's terms, because that's the only way that I'm going to understand this subject, is it's almost like the next generation of supercomputing. It is the ability for us to solve certain mathematical problems and other challenges that are beyond the reach of even today's supercomputers. And so Chicago is one of the world hubs for quantum technology. And so hopefully we as a country can leverage that strength in Illinois and in Chicago.
You've talked about quantum computing there, which is really important. And there are other applications I think you've talked about in the past: quantum information, quantum sensing, all of which are different applications of this powerful technology. What's interesting, and I know you're on this topic often, which is what the Chinese are doing and how the PRC is really investing significantly in this area as well. How do we stack up in your view?
I think that we're neck and neck in terms of kind of the state of our technology versus theirs. The difference is that they are spending a lot of resources to take the lead, and they're doing so obviously in the private sector, but in the public sector. I mean, they've invested something like $16 billion last year in quantum alone. We are at like $4 billion in the U.S. in public spend on this particular issue. And so with that kind of spending, with that type of investment, we can't, just sit idly by and let them race past us.
I think you've underscored it. Multiples more public spending on quantum, an emerging technology where the market is still fledgling. That's a really important point you mentioned. Now, we may be ahead on private investment, but where the technology is right now requires a public investment, I think is what you're saying. And what's interesting is CSIS has just put out a commission report that says that in some areas, like quantum communications, China is ahead, although not across the board, but certainly in that application. Tell us what we can do to catch up, particularly on public investment.
Well, first of all, I think the number one issue, the rate determining step, from what I can gather, talking to people in the quantum sector, is our workforce. We just don't have enough talent. For every 3 jobs in this particular field, we can only fill 1 of them. And for the other kind of high-tech jobs in this field, many of them are immigrants. And our immigration system is really screwed up right now to the point where it's, unfortunately, it's basically causing uncertainty. It's causing researchers and others to question whether America should be the place where they do their research. And we can't afford to have that. We got to attract and retain the very best talent from around the world in this field as well as others.
Understood. And you have been a leader on the workforce agenda when it comes to critical and emerging technology, including quantum. Tell us a little bit more on what your thoughts are on a game plan. So there's the homegrown talent that we need to develop and cultivate around STEM for areas like quantum and other critical and emerging technologies. You've mentioned the immigration piece. How do we strike the right balance between these, and what should we be doing?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think nurturing that homegrown talent is crucial. I actually convened a roundtable last week at the Chicago Quantum Exchange, which is a really neat group of entities who've come together. These are universities, it's Fermi, it's Argonne, it's University of Chicago, University of Illinois, but it also includes the aldermen from the area. It includes educators, community colleges. And the idea is this, which is, okay, here are our needs within the quantum field. How can we train people at the youngest levels to be interested and then to later develop that interest into, skills that can be applicable in this field? And so those aldermen are really crucial because they know the kids in the neighborhood, so to speak, and they bring them to the quantum park. We actually have it's called IQMP, Illinois Quantum Park, which is on the southeast side of Chicago on Lake Michigan. And it's basically developing old steel mills, or the area formerly occupied by steel mills that have gone dormant, and basically reimagining that space as where we're going to have a quantum industry. If I can go back to that immigration piece for just 1 second, I'm glad that President Trump said that he believes that, first, he believes in H-1Bs, which is a key part of every high-tech field, including quantum. But he also talked about potentially stapling a green card to people's higher educational diplomas, whether it's a PhD or a master's in some of these high-tech fields. I think that type of innovation in the immigration space would be very welcome in quantum.
There's so many things that you said there that strike a chord. There is a competition not for technology only, but for the talent that can build technology capabilities, and that's global, and we need to understand that. And the second thing, which I thought was really striking from the story that you described in Chicago, is that it's a matter of policy and choice how technology and technology innovation benefits the population at large. It's not something that happens automatically. It requires work, but then it's to everyone's benefit. And so let me ask you something there, which is that the skills we're talking about when we say quantum or any other technology is not just PhD scientists, if I understand it correctly. There are all kinds of skill levels that are needed to actually build the backbone for quantum technologies in the United States. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Only a fraction of the types of people that are necessary in the quantum field, require a very highly advanced degree. A lot of the others are going to be technologists. They're going to be electrical engineers or people who are interested in that field, but now are applying those skills in quantum. It's going to be HVAC people because of the need for tremendous cooling for this type of technology. In short, I believe, after talking to these educators as well as what I call quantum activists, if you will, that basically it requires people with an aptitude, but more than that, an interest in the area. And if we can just have people with an aptitude and interest, we can teach them the skills that would make them useful in the field.
Powerful. Let me ask you something about Illinois. We are very interested at CSIS in our department in understanding how local communities can help us compete globally. And the story of the Chicago Quantum Exchange and the corridor you're building in Chicago and Urbana-Champaign is really striking. So tell us a little bit more about why you're betting on Illinois.
Well, I'm betting on Illinois because Illinois bet on me, Navin. My family, I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, and my parents immigrated there. And what can I say? Illinois has done so much for my family. But the reason why we should bet on Illinois for quantum
Yeah.
is because University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign,
Yeah.
Northwestern, University of Chicago, Fermilab, Argonne, plus the huge concentration of headquarters of Fortune 500 companies in that area make it not only a place to innovate in the quantum field because of the huge concentration of physicists, for instance, in Illinois, but also a place to apply those innovations in solving everyday problems and then commercializing those solutions. So you have kind of potentially from end to end the ability to make quantum useful for people's everyday lives.
So that's striking. There is the private sector, there's university capabilities, there's the community. All of these coming together generate the competitive advantage for why you would bet on Illinois, or why we should bet on Illinois, as you've said. Let me now shift gears for a second, because what you've described here is how we go on the offense, whether it's quantum or any other technology. But you've also been a leader on the importance of defensive tools. In other words, you can't just pretend that you're going to build the capabilities while you have real threats from our adversaries. I would call them malign threats in some cases, sort of IP theft and things like that, as well as mercantilist threats, particularly when you have non-market actors like the PRC operating in technology value chains where we're trying to build a competitive advantage. So you have advocated strongly for the use of export controls and other such tools. Help us, bring us into this, Congressman. Tell us why those are important, even as we invest on the offense.
Well, I think that with regard to these export controls, for instance, the idea here is let's not export stuff that could be used against us. Mm-hmm. If I had to make it super simple, whether it is high-end semiconductor chips, whether it's money, let's not put it. Let's not have it deployed in a way that could, for instance, help modernize the People's Liberation Army, or be used to persecute minorities or Uyghurs or Hong Kongers or surveil dissidents. I mean, be used in ways that would go against our values also. So we have tried to work with whoever is willing to listen to us, whether it's the Biden administration, now the Trump administration, on a bipartisan basis to, I think, reflect what the American people want, which is they want us to continue to work with trusted partners and have good relationships where we can do business, but then with other countries that might be considered strategic adversaries, let's be careful.
Yeah. The export control agenda kind of begs the question around impact and enforcement. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because this is sort of one of the legacies of the Biden administration. Like, how do you actually ensure effective implementation of these? Could you share some of your thoughts on that, Congressman?
Well, I think that, if you take, for instance, the high-end chip issue, what we see is that they definitely bite. The export controls do have the intended effect. You don't have to go further than just asking, Mr. Liang, the founder of DeepSeek, like, what's the number one barrier to your advancement as a company? He says, well, it's these export controls, because they stockpiled a bunch of chips before the export controls went into effect, but they don't have access to the next generation of chips. Okay. Yeah. So they do have a bite. That being said, we know that there are workarounds, let's say, that the CCP is engineering through other countries and in other ways. And so we have to be nimble in dealing with those workarounds and tightening the restrictions where necessary, and then also just being smart in terms of deploying additional technology to maybe gate the diffusion of some of this technology. One of the most interesting things that I learned about is yesterday, CNAS had a presentation about how there's technology to essentially put sensors within chips that would essentially disable them if they end up getting geolocated in certain places they shouldn't be, right? I mean, that's the type of technology that we should be thinking about in the future.
Yeah.
We don't want this stuff in the hands of bad actors.
Yeah. An interesting perspective on what trusted chips could look like going forward. But I think you really are shining a light on what the enforcement capabilities are that we need to actually effect, support effective implementation of export controls. So that's one element of trade. Let me sort of round out with the other element of trade, which is tariffs. We are now kind of well into the era of Trump 2.0 tariffs. I think we seem to have averted for now momentarily a North American trade war, but there's certainly a bigger question around tariffs and the role of that instrument in the economic relations with other countries. I've always said that like the enduring test for tariffs are going to be whether they help or hinder technology innovation and competition and our ability to compete. Do you have any perspective on how we should think about tariffs in the context of quantum or other technologies?
So my 30,000 foot perspective on this is that you need tariffs to deal with potential economic aggression that another country pursues.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if it pursues dumping, which the CCP has actively pursued for China over decades, with regard to aluminum or steel or solar panels or electric vehicles, well, in that case, we should adopt strategic tariffing to try to level the playing field for our domestic producers and perhaps change behavior over time with regard to China.
Yeah.
However, if you're going to slap across the board tariffs on everything from, noodles to diapers to every other product that another country is making, well, in that case, it looks like to me two things are happening. One, you're just raising prices without really specifying what behavior needs to change in the offending country in order for the tariffs to go away. And then two, you're potentially starting a trade war where there are going to be retaliatory tariffs on your stuff. So if we then look at quantum or technologies of the future, I think that, yes, we should be concerned about any type of technology, whether it's low-end semiconductor chips that the Chinese use to dump on the rest of the market that we're going to have to tariff. But where a country is not practicing economic aggression in the traditional sense of the term, they're just better at making something. Well, let's take advantage of that and let's innovate on our own and incorporate that technology into our stuff to make better stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's just the bottom line. That's how economics works, I think. So, I think we want to continue to be very cautious here and not start like, I think the Wall Street Journal said the dumbest trade war in history between us and Canada. That's just not a good way to go.
Well, you've kind of underscored what is time-tested and stress-tested, which is the ability of the American innovation system to generate repeated wins and the need for us to keep our eyes on the prize when it comes to that. So I really appreciate your perspectives today and your leadership on a number of fronts, including quantum in Illinois, and critical and emerging tech in general. So, Congressman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. And you didn't even make me tell a Schrodinger's cat joke today. So thank you so much for not making me have to do my quantum jokes.
Well, if you want, we could let you do one.
Well, my staff instructed me to tell you that the best illustration of my knowing quantum is that I don't understand quantum. So I guess that's supposed to be really funny. So thank you.
That would be you and me. Thank you, Congressman. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you for joining this eye-opening conversation with Congressman Krishnamoorthi. You can find this episode of Betting on America and more on CSIS.org, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Navin Girishankar reminding you that everyone has a role to play in winning the technology race.